Guys, welcome back. Welcome back. If anyone is in question of that we're still in the month of September, I'm here to report that we are. I'm slightly confused.
It's like 5 weeks this month. It's a long month.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of glad because then I went back to look at things and I was like, oh, I haven't done this yet, but it's still the same month. So I feel like justified.
Well, this will be a
So
little bit delayed going out. I don't think it will go out. It'll probably go out early October to everyone, but yeah. I don't know. I'm still feeling summer vibes. That's technically summer didn't start until yesterday.
you mean fall?
I mean fall.
Well, I did have butternut squash ravioli last night or 2 nights ago. Mm,
That's not it for me.
it,
I'm not
but it, we weren't ready yet.
I had butternut
We
squash
wanted to be
dinner
ready,
last
but we
night.
weren't. And then I kind of like regretted just having a lobster roll.
Yeah,
So
we actually
that's where
went to
we are.
Lenny and Joe's. We went to Lenny and Joe's over the weekend
Ooh, we
in a
love a
little
little
Ashley.
Lenny and Joe's
Shout
with a
out.
little carousel action.
Yeah, yeah. Carousel
Did
was
the kids go
closed,
on the
but
carousel?
no, it was
Oh, okay.
closed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Was
They
the ice
played
cream
with
stand open?
rocks instead. No, we went to Ashley's.
Oh, okay. Well, that hits.
Yeah, always. But they had pumpkin ice cream. So I'm just gonna let everybody know that pumpkin ice cream, that's
Is
the
not
jam
it?
for me. That's the jam for me.
No. So you're a pumpkin spice latte too. Is that what it's called?
I
I don't
actually
drink
just
those
put a
yet.
couple I just put a couple pumps into my hot Americano. I don't the full PSL is it's overwhelming. It's too much sugary. I can't do it.
Well, you just have to ask for half the sweetness. Hot take.
Or just put 2 pumps in your venti Americano.
Sure.
It's
I
not
love that
even
for you.
noon, and I'm drinking a Diet Coke, so that's where we're at, if everybody
I've
needs
only had 1 cup of coffee this morning, but I'll tell you, I said to Sam, I was like, "This shit was rocket fuel." I am the guys, just to do a brief check-in here. We're gonna keep it brief. We got a tight turnaround today on this episode. But I was telling Jill that I was really, really struggling the last couple of weeks because there was a lot of travel, different time zones. Whatever like space I was able to do that in a previous life, it is not this life. Okay? It is not this life. I took 2
Also
weeks to recover and I just worked out today for the first time in almost 2 weeks.
but time out, you also haven't had a coffee machine.
No, I have the coffee. I have a coffee maker. Don't put me on blast on here. Our nice coffee maker, our nice coffee maker, which is very nice, has
There's
been
been a
out of
coffee
commission.
situation. There has
But we
definitely been
have
a coffee situation.
yeah, so like I can't just go hit the button, but like I could just make another pot.
Okay, there's been a lack of coffee some mornings, and if that's the reason why you're not working out, I'm not sure, but when we talk about getting accountability from our friends and colleagues and you can't really get that accountability if you're not really sharing where you're at. So that's what we realized this morning is that Molly has been withholding that she has not moved her body or exercised in 2 weeks now, which that tracks with why she's been struggling with her energy levels so much.
And sleep and just everything. So we're
So
back, guys, in case
I
you were wondering.
the
We're back.
rocket fuel is coffee times exercise is what is actually happening.
Yeah, and I probably honestly have been lacking because I haven't seen my favorite fitness influencer post any videos lately either. Shout out Zach Snitzer.
Oh, I thought you
So,
were talking about Ian.
well,
And
Ian
I was
too,
like
but he's
but
he's a
I was
regular.
like,
He's
he
I'm numb to him.
definitely has been posting.
I'm numb to him. So I see it and I'm just like, I'll never be where you are. So moving on. But Zach is more relatable. All right,
Speaking
let's get
this is a
into it.
really good segue to what we're talking about today, which I think Zach may struggle with, which is imposter syndrome.
So good. Guys, we're
As
talking
a
about seasons of imposter syndrome as a parent, as an employee, as a leader, as women in recovery, men in recovery, come one, come all. Come sit down and talk about imposter syndrome with us today. And, I think that when we hear the term imposter syndrome, what comes to mind is feeling a lack of worthiness or a lack of ability or an inferiority, all the above. And so
100%.
maybe give an example of where you have felt imposter syndrome to really paint a picture, because I think it's a term that's kind of thrown around a lot. So maybe something that's a little bit more digestible for people to say, like, oh, that makes sense. Because I'm not sure
Well
people use it accurately all the time.
well, essentially, imposter syndrome is feeling as if you don't belong in some certain community or space despite having the qualifications to belong in that space.
Mm. Very good definition. Did you just pull that out?
I did.
Shout
So
out to the Diet Coke on that.
my example would be when I was first stepping into like a professional role as a social worker. So I have my bachelor's in social work. So when I graduated with my bachelor's in social work, there were certain jobs that I was qualified for with my BSW, whether that be I was in like a case management role at that point, and then I went in to get my master's. But I remember feeling like because of my past, because of the things that I experienced, that
Mm.
it was like especially because I was working with clients coming out of jail. I was coming out of I was working with individuals on parole coming out of incarceration, and
Yep.
in my mind, I was like, "Okay, I'm only a few years out from this myself." So, like, it is this to me, I was like an imposter. Like, they don't know. I think it also has to do with, can other people see my deficits? Because even though I was qualified from an education standpoint, it's almost like, "Oh, they're gonna find out that, like, I'm not really good at this thing, or that, like, I don't have or that I was just where they were 4 or 5 years ago." Like, I think that's a big part of it too, because we know our whole selves, but in a
Yeah, and I
professional
think that
setting,
also,
we wanna present our best selves
well, of
without
course.
deficits.
Right. I think you want to present your best self in a lot of areas without the
Mhm,
deficits. Relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, and or otherwise, right? But I also think that when you're living with some sort of imposter syndrome, what happens, at least my experience, is that it almost is like I'm not doing enough, right? I have to like overachieve to show that I am worthy of this role, right? And or this position or this conversation. And I think a lot of times what happens is that, I think this goes back to a previous episode, at times making yourself small became really normal or consistent. And so when you're in this space of breaking the next ceiling, if you will, right? Given your
mhm.
example of being incarcerated, coming out, recreating a life, and then going on to help people. Well, firstly, let's talk about like epitome of purpose. How awesome, right? Like that's a huge, huge deal. And really getting to the place where you can say, I have made it to this next step. I do have something to offer, and I can still be relatable. So I think what happens with the imposter syndrome is getting caught in what was rather than what is. At least this is my experience, especially working in behavioral health.
Mhm.
Like getting caught in, oh, I have a similar experience to you. So there's this,
Well, you get
I
it's
don't
called
know.
countertransference. It's called
There we go.
countertransference, where we make your stuff about me and vice versa, where we
Mhm.
kind of get reminded of. I think the word trigger is overused.
Please,
It's
completely.
more of I'm now reminded of where I used to be when I was in your shoes. So sometimes, especially in behavioral health settings or counseling settings, it's like, but I think this can happen in any, if you're a mentor mentee relationship, it's like, oh, I've been where you're at. So I know how you can get through this, but like we're different people. So like what works for me may not work for you and vice versa. Right. We
Yeah.
actually, we have similarities, but there's still some differences in like what we're capable of. Right. I also, I feel like a lot of this comes from a place of wanting to overachieve in a way to fulfill stuff that's maybe missing from you internally. And what I mean by that
Mhm.
is from I'll say it from like a trauma lens. People typically who are having either imposter syndrome or feeling like they're not good enough or that they haven't yet achieved some level of, I don't know, success or whatever the thing is that they feel like they don't qualify for, they're they're constantly striving for this, like, epitome of what that means. Like, "Oh, well, if I just get
Mhm.
this degree, or if I just get this certification, or if I just, have X amount of clients or earn X amount of money, then, like, I won't feel like an imposter." And I would argue that it's really something internally that you have to own because it's not it's not either or. It's not either I'm a professional or I'm not. It's I'm a professional and I have more things to learn. I'm a professional and I have these things that I need to work on because we're always evolving and growing. I don't think anyone before they die reaches some place of perfection in human being like accomplishment. I think we always have something we can work on.
Yeah, and I guess, when we think about it, there's a lot of folks that are pretty high functioning that still wrestle with it, right? So I can say that I actually just had a check in with a colleague and friend today, and having to fact check my own imposter syndrome at times, you know, am I good enough? Am I capable? Am I qualified? I mean, these are just some of the like basic, questions that come up. I've really grappled, from an educational standpoint, right? There's been my path through my education and through my experience was not linear, right? I did not get out of high school and go to college right away and get the job out of college and, so on and so forth,
Mhm.
right? My path was a little bit more windy. And when I was sharing with my colleague today, who was also grappling with some of that, self doubt, self worth, self, self inflicted pain, I'll say, because when we keep it trapped and don't allow to bounce it off someone, then there's nobody to fact check you. Then you're just kind of in your own head, right? And that's really where all of the things that we've been talking about on this podcast brew, the victim mentality, less than, feeling less than about yourself, not cultivating connection. So for me, it's kind of all wrapped up into the same space, right? It may come out a bit different, but if I call Jill and I say, "Hey, I'm really grappling, like, am I capable of building this business? Am I capable of helping this, client? Am I capable of being a parent?" Right? So that's kind of another way that it shows up. Then I have another sounding board for someone to point out, hey, these are the things you may be struggling in, but these are also the things that are going really well. Right? And it just level sets.
Well, it goes back to Brene Brown's work about kind of exposing shame with connecting with other people and with sharing, right? Because I think when we share our experiences and we kind of say what's going on, we can learn from other people. That's how I learned to have more confidence in where I was at and not be in that imposter space because it's like when you step into a leadership role and owning a business, unless you're talking to other business owners, you think that the challenges that come up that just really floor you at times where you're like, "Whoa, I made a huge mistake," or "I didn't see that coming," or you think like you're the only one experiencing it. And that's what shame
Mhm.
really is, right? It makes you feel like you're the only one experiencing it. You feel bad for something that you've done. You feel like you are wrong as a person, like something's wrong with you versus I did something wrong, which is guilt. Shame and guilt are totally different. And so once I start talking to other business owners or I go to them with my problems and humble myself of like, hey, like, is this normal? Is this like, what have you been here before? Like, then I learn from other people. They can be vulnerable with me that, like, yeah, that happened to me. And sometimes it's a financially costly mistake. Sometimes it's just like an ego costly mistake where it's like, ooh, I have to like eat some crow either with staff or investors or my whatever. I think
Yeah.
there's just some like so, but I think the point is though, is that you think you're the only one. And so if you continue to struggle with imposter syndrome, I think it's because you're keeping yourself stuck. Either you're not listening to other feedback that you're getting from other people and you just require ongoing validation, which I would say is
Mm,
your issue,
mm,
and or you're not seeking that out. So you're kind of stuck in a silo of your own thoughts and that's keeping you stuck in a different way.
yeah.
Um, when it's an internal thing where you require validation from a trauma lens, I would say that that's more of like a negative belief that you hold about yourself that needs to be worked through probably in therapy.
Well, I think we talk about the pendulum swing, right? So I can only share from my experience, but I'll tell you that for a good portion of my life, I needed a lot of validation from a lot of people, right? And there was this lack of authentic connection and lack of confidence in my relationships. And so what happened is that I lowered my standards in a lot of ways. And I've actually been able to have like a big full circle moment in the last couple of weeks, kind of talking with another woman who went through a similar scenario as me, right? Lowering my standards, feeling like I had to behave in a way to, connect with another individual and really not honor my value or my worth. And that went on for a period of time in my life, right? And now the pendulum I feel like has swung the complete opposite direction, right? So there is this middle ground, right? I think some level of imposter syndrome is fairly normal and helps us grow and achieve and can be utilized as a catalyst for good, right? It's kind
Well,
of the vehicle that helps you fact check yourself and say, where am I
am I
here?
on the right
Right?
path? Yeah. I mean, if you just walk
Yes.
around thinking you're the best at everything all the time,
Right.
that's the end. That's
That's another thing.
you're a narcissist. I mean, you can't just walk around thinking you're the best at everything all the time because it's probably not true. And if you do, like, you need another set of like humbling experiences, right? Yeah.
But I think it's interesting for the validation piece because at times that's not my go-to, right? Because I think my own internal barometer is if I need validation from somebody, that puts me back into this like part of my life where that was really important to me, right?
Yeah.
So, what I've noticed is that when I actually do check in with someone authentically and I do check in to get a little bit of like, hey, where am I here? And it's not even for validation, but more so a sounding board. But in turn, I receive some validation. I'm like, oh, that's actually really nice. Like, I kind of did need that, right? So, being aware of what is needed at any given time to break some cycle or some internal hamster wheel that I'm caught on, has been really crucial.
Well, I think that there are people who are motivated internally and externally, right? And so I think and there are some people who naturally need more external validation than internal validation. I think it's just how some people are wired. For me, and I think you can probably relate to this too. I just think of I've always been somebody that if I decide I'm going to do something, full stop, I am figuring out a way to do it. There's no failing in that. Like it's just me figuring it out. It doesn't mean that I don't have failures along the way, but like I'm going to get to that end result. And I don't require a lot of like external motivators or people saying like you're doing a good job for me to get there. Like I don't
Right. But
that's
there are
why
people that really do need that.
there's people that have a little are more naturally either, have self-doubt or they just
Mhm,
require that in a different way. It doesn't necessarily
mhm.
mean it's wrong. I just think if you rely on that all the time, then your sense of self and who you are depends on what other people are thinking about you at any given moment. And that I think is a slippery slope.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really great segue to how this shows up in parenthood, right? So, to give a bit of context, there was a lot of hesitation for me. I think I had imposter syndrome being a parent from the minute I got pregnant. I would say before I got pregnant. I think I had this innate ability to have this like maternal instinct to help, right? So I could help other people, I could lead with purpose, I could connect with others. been able to connect with others' children, feel like I have that empathy. And when it came to me delivering that for my own, I felt very hesitant. And I think imposter syndrome showed up in a way that was I felt like I was enough in my job and I didn't know if I was going to be enough as a parent, right? And so that dual role really kept me struggling up until
Mhm.
my son was born. I mean, I do remember, and I think I've mentioned this on a previous podcast episode, that my director of admissions at the time looked at me and she's like, "You know, you're having a child like in the next week."
Like,
And
it's
so
hap
there was, yeah, and there was this level of pressure. What's that going to look like? Because you hear a lot of talk, right? Everyone has opinions. You're not going to want to work. You're not going to want to do this. You're going to want to be at home. You're going to want to, but I could give you a million different things that people
Oh, yeah.
shared with me. And I will say people probably shared a little bit less with me than the average because I think there is some level of guard up that I have. But
I'm pretty
what
sure I was
was,
like, "You're gonna wanna go back to work when y trust me.
yeah,
I
but I
know you."
think that, yeah, and there is this level of when I did can I go back to work and show up as my best self and be a mom, right? So I think there is just a lot to explore in how imposter syndrome shows up. So I guess what I would ask you is did you ever feel like you weren't enough as a parent, even though you had the evidences otherwise? I think I already know this answer, but
I don't feel like this shows up a lot for me, honestly. I That's not to say that there aren't moments where I'm like, "Ugh, I really didn't handle that well." Um, but again, I I view that as a growth opportunity versus me being self-deprecating in that moment of like, "Oh, I'm the worst. I'm not enough for my kids." Like,
mhm,
I will say that from birth until basically school age, so 0 to 5, I felt really competent and capable of connecting with my kids, like, being attuned with them. I there I don't know, I just not to say that, like, sleepless nights wasn't hard or balancing that with work. It's not that none of it was hard, it's just that I think I had a realistic expectation of what that was gonna look like. I didn't in my head think, "Oh, they're gonna sleep at 3 months," and when they didn't, like, I was all spun out about it. I was very much go with the flow, which is not necessarily a trait that I have, but with the kids, I don't know. My husband pointed this out the other day about, like, how I'm just I'm very in touch with them. The kids hug me all the time. I hug them. I'm very, like, physical with the kid. Like, I'm not like that in life. Like, I don't want you approaching to hug me. It's just not.
so the next person that sees Jill after this episode should definitely give her a hug. That's amazing.
But, like, my kids are all over me. Like, and at times that does become a bit much and overstimulating. I would say now that they're school age and we're coming across these issues where maybe I have my own experiences, like, I'll say for to have, like, a child, a girl, a daughter in middle school right now brings up my experiences in middle school as a
Mm.
girl in middle school, right? And so sometimes now I see myself feeling more like falling short in terms of like, "Ooh, did I handle that right?" Because now there's, like, other kids involved. Listen, girls are assholes in middle school, and I feel very compelled to share that with my daughter and make sure she understands that, because I don't want her to be seen as one of the mean girls, but also I have to recognize that she has her own process, and, like, my daughter's not an asshole, but, like, she could be. I don't know. Like, I wasn't until I was, or maybe that's just how I always was, I don't know. But in terms of a growth opportunity and why I phrase it that way is because in those moments when I have that gut reaction, maybe I was short, maybe I wasn't handling things, maybe I flew off the handle. Like, I tell my therapy clients all the time when they come in here and they feel that mom guilt or parent guilt, like, "Ooh, I didn't handle this right. I flipped out. I made them go to bed by themselves and I could hear them crying and I couldn't be there for them." if you think that us as therapists are showing up as like the perfect parent all the time because we have the education and the knowledge of like what's right and what's not, none of us are perfect parents. Like I flip out, I lose it. Granted, I generally give a warning. Like if you guys don't listen, I it's gonna happen. I'm going to flip out. Like there's typically a warning. They don't heed that warning. Fine. Then this event happens. However, the most important thing, and I'll never forget this class when I was in my master's program, was about this study around good enough parenting. We have to
Mm,
be good enough parents. And I think maybe that's why it stuck with me because I was pregnant when I was taking that class. I can remember that article. I can remember for some reason we had the class in a Starbucks. I can remember the professor. I can remember where
interesting.
we were. But like that study and that class stuck with me because it's not about being perfect. It's about when you flip out, when you lose your shit, when you do something that you don't it's not really the greatest example for your kids, that you are able to go back and say, "Hey, mommy wasn't her best self. Mommy
Yeah.
should not have yelled like that." And you're modeling then how to apologize and how to say like, "Hey, that wasn't my best. How can I make it better? Like, how are you feeling about it?" You're opening up that vulnerable conversation with them. So like maybe that's where my background in like as a therapist comes in where I don't like beat myself up over it. But that doesn't mean there's not moments. But I think that's different from feeling like you're a failure as a parent.
Well, I think that that goes back to this past weekend. There was this moment where my toddler was like, "Don't fight," right? Talking to me and my husband. And we were in a conversation that we were probably, you know, bickering about something. I don't know what it was.
Which
And
in any marriage is I'm sorry,
but
but you're not
I will tell
arguing, like,
you,
I don't know if that's good either.
sure, but it stopped me dead in
Oh,
my
yeah.
track.
Oh, yeah, because that is that
I
mirror.
I was in a spiral, okay? I was you talk about unfair self-criticism, talking about, good enough parenting, I mean, all of it. And I made a conscious decision. I texted out the text. I actually sent this to Jill. I texted out the text to tell you what happened, and I deleted it. And I was like, "I'm not telling anybody this. Like, this is embarrassing. This is like, the shame, the fear, all that sort of stuff."
You
And
texted it.
then I was like, I did eventually, but it
And what
was
did I
after a few writes and deletes, okay?
and what did I say?
You said it I've been there, and how you talk about it after is where the repair comes in, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but
Did you
you
talk
basically
to
were
him?
like, "Yeah,
He was probably like, "Eh."
yeah," he had moved on.
Yeah,
He had moved on
yeah.
completely.
But that's why it's important for us too to have the repair because I now messed up my kid. Now that we try to overachieve and do all this stuff because we're not a good enough
Yes.
parent. Meanwhile, he has forgotten this conversation ever even happened. Like,
Well, and I think that goes back to the imposter syndrome too, like, if I had kept that internally, talk about imposter syndrome, not a good enough parent, all the things, right? I'm a parent, I shouldn't be a parent, right? All, whatever. And I'm not saying that I would have been full send for days on days, but being able to sit with
it's
it,
possible.
acknowledge it, it is possible, but sit with it, acknowledge it, and then offload it to a degree to get feedback. I mean, I think that's really the key. So when we think about, how do we move through an imposter syndrome or a sticky situation in any role, that's what I got, guys. I mean, that's the only thing that I know to do is fact check it with somebody else and get some clarity, right? Because I'll go back to what I said, some episodes ago, and it's a tried and true lesson that has stuck with me for years and years and years that I learned from a person in recovery that said, "I have a clear perspective on your life, you have a clear perspective on mine, but we don't have a clear perspective on our own." And so when we're struggling with perception and we're struggling with understanding like where we are in our own space, that's where we need the outside view, you know? So,
Yeah.
it's my hot take for this episode.
I mean, in terms of us having seasons of this happen, I go back to what are you doing to take care of yourself on a daily basis. Like it goes back to routine, it goes back to the basics, it goes back to, this is a recovery phrase, but like hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Like,
Mhm.
you know, when we're in those spaces, we're typically not showing up in our mind.
Mhm.
Our perception is even more off. Like if, I mean, like just from like sharing about not sleeping well over the last couple weeks, like when we're not sleeping well, our thinking tends to be a little shittier. Like we end up not
Mhm.
being in a good perspective on life. We are short with ourselves and others. We're not as forgiving. We're not as able to maybe tap into our spiritual practice, our fitness practice, like the things that keep us rooted and grounded, right? I've learned over the years, and you're more than welcome to take a page of my book, but I travel a lot. I like to travel. But what I don't like is the hangover from traveling. So I have learned to stay on somewhat of a routine when I'm traveling. Now, that looks different depending on what's going on, right? Uh, Molly and I were just out in California together. I think we were both rocked from the time change when we came back. Truly did not go well, and I couldn't have prepared. The only thing I could have done differently is get a different flight. I feel like back.
You
The
know what
time
there
was
was
awful.
no preparation for?
An eight
Sitting in
hour delay.
LA sitting in LAX for 7 hours. In
No.
a and I have feedback for LAX. If anybody wants talk about feedback, talk about complaints. I mean, I have feedback for the airport. Lounge, subpar. Restaurants, not good.
Not it.
Uh, so
I
there is
walked
some
2.5
feedback.
miles. I walked 2.5 miles to the terminal. Granted, I may have missed a turn somewhere for a shuttle to that terminal, but the whole time I'm thinking, thank God I'm able-bodied because I I mean, I saw this woman walking with a child, all these I'm like, I thought of you and your TSA experience because I'm like,
Exactly.
I
Take a
said to her
bath.
at one point, I said, "Did we miss a sign?" I said, this is a 2-mile walk. She goes, "No, it's very far away." This is not it.
Wild.
So anyway,
So
but the point is that like staying on track while I'm traveling, meaning like I work out, maybe not as much or as hard, right? But I still move my body. I still do my journaling. I still do my prayers because it becomes much harder to get back into that routine when we get back. And I'll tell you, you want to talk about imposter syndrome and not feeling good enough or worthy enough. Like uh, it's hard for me to get out of my routine, step back into the shit at work and just like pick up where I left off and feel like I'm competent and capable because I'm in a season right now of tremendous transition of like self doubt and some things that I probably did not do well. And I've had to really show up in a vulnerable space with my staff and management and be like, hey, this is on me. I think, and my irritation is showing up in different ways where I have to be like, I'm actually irritated at myself right now, guys. And I just have to own that, like, because we didn't have to be in this space, but I kind of waited too long to make a decision. And now here we are. And
well,
so,
what did you learn from that?
what did I learn from which part of it? From what
Well, it sounds like
happened?
what you're describing is you waited too long in a situation
Make a
with a staff
decision.
member. Yeah, with a staff member. I think, you know, we get in a place of comfortability, right? And we also get in a place of, you know, you don't have to fix something that's not broken, right? Even though it is probably broken, but it's some semblance of glued together.
So, we have grown 3 times from where we started. And in terms of volume of clients, of staff, all of that. When you do that, the systems that you start with are not going to be systems that work when you 3x your business, right? I know this logically. I consult with other people and I help them change their systems. I And so I think what happened is I became very comfortable in things working a certain way and being like knowing in my head what a pain in the ass it was going to be to rock the boat on that. And so I waited to make a decision until there was I no longer had a choice. I had to now step in and rumble with this. So what that means is So my biggest lesson is there is actually no good time for that to happen, because whether it was now, whether it was 4 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, I would have the same problem and workload on my plate. Like, I'm going to have to deconstruct some systems. I have to put I just there it just becomes a lot of administrative work that frankly I don't want to do, but I have to do, right? And also, I think now is also the perfect time for it to be happening, because now I have connections to some solutions in a different way that I wouldn't have had if this happened 6 months ago too, right? So
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, kind of goes to show the shift that we have in leadership, especially from being in the room to owning the room, or running
Mhm.
the room, if you will. And so a lot of times we have to be in connection with the people about us, but then there's also times where we really need to lead the room, right? And at times, at least from my experience, I've had some pretty significant face down moments where I've allowed things to go on longer than they should. I've kept employees on longer than they really probably should have been there. And how I was able to wrestle with some of that self-doubt was, how do we own it? Like you just said, take accountability and say, I made a mistake. And then also, you know, getting to, once you've made, at least for me, once I have embraced that I made a mistake, I share that. I don't sit on it, right? Then it's moving on. Now, how am I going to embrace my authority, my role, my position to now raise to the next level, right?
so
And
that's where
so,
imposter syndrome is dangerous, because I think there are leaders, and I think this I don't even think this is gender specific. I think what happens is when you make a mistake and you have to either have that face down moment in front of staff, which is what
mhm,
I'm kind of living in this week, right?
mhm,
And again, I don't even know that they would perceive it to be that way, but for me, it's like, no, guys, this is on me. Like, I failed because we don't have to be here, but we are here now.
yeah,
And so again, I don't think that the staff perceives it that way necessarily, but I know that this isn't how I want our mission and vision to be,
right,
to play out, right?
right,
So anyway, if you make those mistakes, or these things happen, or somebody leaves the company, or somebody gives you bad feedback at work about your leadership style, or whatever the thing is, imposter syndrome is dangerous if those moments lead to you feeling like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of this role. I doubt I don't that self-doubt kicks in of like, I don't think that I can actually do this. Versus what we're talking about, what you're talking about is like, I step into action. Okay, how do I solve
mhm,
this now? Like,
mhm,
there's still that repair, there's still that acknowledgement of like, this happened. Let's not externalize that onto, but like, I also have to wrestle with how I feel about it sometimes.
right,
I actually just saw this video that somebody posted online, and it was like, if you're always getting feedback about what your tone is and how you're showing up giving feedback to people, you may have to look at how you're feeling, because it's not like how your voice, it's not the volume of your voice, it's not what you're saying, it's that you haven't checked your emotional state before delivering this message, and your
right,
irritation, your anger, your
is
anxiety,
coming out.
whatever it is coming across in your tone, and everyone in the room feels it. So, like,
Mhm,
that's another thing I've been grappling with, and kind of like, in terms of my middle managers being like, hey, I'm irritated right now. And I feel like I just need to state that so everybody knows, like, I'm not irritated with you. I'm irritated with XYZ, because I do think it shifts at least where people aren't like leaving the room like, what's her problem? It's like, well, I've already told you what my problem is. Like, this is where I'm at right now.
yeah, and also just embracing that and being able to be honest about it, but then also, you know, what's the next step, right? Because there's always a next step, and like you said, the imposter syndrome really becomes the stuck point when you
Yes.
haven't done anything different, right? It's kind of like you're just stuck in that gray area that you haven't really made a move forward or back. So, I think, in the last couple minutes, I really wanted to talk about and I think this is an area of our life that we don't talk about as much. I think it comes and weaves in and out of our conversations, but, in the infancy stages of getting into recovery, getting sober many years ago, how did when we talk about imposter syndrome, I think that's probably not the first time I experienced it, but it's definitely the time where I had to experience it sober, which is I think for a lot of folks who are in recovery, primarily what they did was use alcohol and substances to not have imposter syndrome.
Well, to
Right?
not to be separate from your feelings, right? You don't wanna feel
Yeah,
at
to be
all.
separate from your feelings, but imposter syndrome, not feeling like you fit in, not feeling a part of, not feeling like you're connected to your friend groups, not feeling like you're connected to your family, like
Mhm.
all the different examples, right? And those are just to name a few. So in early recovery, showing up in a community, at least for me, of young people that were really, there's always going to be people that are more tight knit than you because there's a bit people that have been around longer than you. And there's always going to be people behind you that also feel like you are more connected than them, right? So there's this ripple effect that occurs in the recovery community. And I remember stepping into those spaces, and honestly, I definitely felt like there was a sense of unworthiness and imposter syndrome around the genuine nature of people in recovery, right? That I was showing up in a space that felt way more sacred than I deserved, right? I think that's probably where my imposter syndrome showed up the most, right? Was like, I don't belong with any of these people. These people are glowing compared to what I have been living
What
in
I'm
and
what
and doing.
I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, so I think that's probably where it came up for me the most, but I'd be interested to hear how it showed up for you in the infancy stages.
Well, I can remember, and I think this happens a lot in recovery, where you show up in a room. The first time I tried to get sober was in Florida, and I remember looking around different people and saying, "I'm nothing like these people." They're
Uh,
talking about DCF cases and getting children taken away and being arrested,
uh,
I compared myself. Imposter syndrome essentially is just I mean, we're just comparing ourselves to other people, right? Like,
mhm,
and so I compared myself out of the room. Like, I that wasn't
mhm,
I'm not like these people. I must not be an alcoholic.
uh-huh.
Fast
Fast
forward to when I
forward.
fast forward to when I came back and
Yeah,
into recovery. It was actually flipped. It was like, "Oh, these people's story are nothing like mine," because I took a deep dive into all those things that I said I would never
mhm,
do, and, like, I think, I think there's definitely that part of, I don't think I'm ever going to be like these people in terms of what they experience now as being grateful for being in recovery, like, I didn't never understood that.
yeah,
Um but I think I think it's a different experience for women in recovery because a lot of times you're in rooms that are full of men. And
yep,
I'm sorry, but depending on your story as a woman, like our stories just, there's different layers of things that we deal with in recovery than men do. And I think they're
mhm,
not always addressed, nor should they be in a mixed setting. And I just feel like, I don't know. I just remember that there wasn't space for me to feel bad about that either. I remember early in recovery people saying, "You're not that special, go help somebody
right,
else."
right,
Like,
right,
so basically, if you started to express that you were feeling some sort of imposter syndrome, or no one cares, go help somebody. Like, that's kind of which I needed that message. I didn't need cuddling.
100%,
I didn't need somebody
100%.
validating me. It was like,
Yeah.
you could just do what you were doing before. If you wanna go back to
Yeah.
that, like, that option's available as well.
Yeah, and I think that, we talk about how did we stay grounded and how did we find our self-worth and how did we combat imposter syndrome? And a lot of it was consistency, right? So I think that, leaning into a community, creating, we talk about 12-step communities and they have things called sponsors. Anyone can replace that with a mentor or otherwise, right? If you're not in a recovery community. But we had people that we were bouncing things off of regularly to stay
Yes.
present, right? And I think half the battle with imposter syndrome is that you're thinking about what was or what it's going to be. Right. And so again, it's really taking you out of that present moment to say, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And when you get
It
early in
doesn't mean you like that, though. It doesn't mean
no.
you like that, but objectively speaking, I'm right where
Yes.
be where your feet are.
Yeah.
That doesn't
And
mean
that
you
is
don't.
drilled in,
Yes.
drilled in, drilled in, drilled in. So again, it kind of level sets the road, right? And I'm so, so grateful that we talked about this today because I think it brings me to a place where I remember my principles, my values, and my moral compass, right? To say, I'm on the path. Some days I feel like I'm off the
No,
path
you
or
gotta
the
be
path
like,
isn't
I
the path.
you gotta be like, "I am that bitch." Sometimes you gotta look like, "No, I'm a boss." Like, there is something to be said for those affirmations in the mirror sometimes. Like, that to me, sometimes you gotta throw on the song that's gonna be like, "Yeah, yep, that's
Yeah.
me."
Yeah.
Little Rick Ross.
I love Rick
You know what I'm
Ross.
talking about. You know what I'm talking
Of
about.
course.
Permission slip.
I think this week's permission slip is exactly that, be where your feet are.
It's a
Be in
good
your
one.
present be in your present moment, be where your feet are because honestly, fear of what was or fear of what is, it's not coming to save you? So, being where your feet are just really absorbs your ability to be present, takes you out of all the fears out of your headspace that, you know, continue to haunt us at times. So, yeah, if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, if there is anything that you'd like us to talk about, any topics, we have
We would
some fun
love
upcoming
suggestions.
guests. Yeah, we have some fun upcoming guests in the coming weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Send this to a friend, send it to somebody who you think that would enjoy it. Give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe to us at No Permission Necessary, and we will see you next time.
Bye.